Alcaraz isn't just walking back into a tournament. He's walking back into the deepest, most physically brutal era men's tennis has arguably ever seen. The rest of the tour hasn't been standing still for 4 months waiting for him. Every top rival has been logging match after match, building rhythm, building confidence, sharpening exactly the kind of instincts that Alcaraz now has to rebuild from a standing start. And a hard-court Masters 1000 followed by a hard-court Grand Slam is about as unforgiving a re-entry point as the calendar could offer. Clay is forgiving on the joints. Grass rewards flat, efficient strikes. Hard courts punish everything, the extra split second of hesitation, the extra fraction of load on that wrist, the extra rally that goes one shot longer than it should because the killer instinct isn't fully back yet. There's also a scheduling reality that can't be ignored. Best of 5 matches at a Grand Slam are an entirely different physical demand than best of 3 at a Masters event. If Cincinnati goes well but exposes even a small crack, a missed backhand under pressure, a visible flinch on a wide forehand, a shortened practice session, that's exactly the kind of signal that either builds or completely erodes confidence heading into New York. This is precisely why the reaction from experienced voices in the sport isn't pessimism for the sake of drama. It's pattern recognition. They've watched other players return from long layoffs with clean medical bills of health, only to lose in the second or third round because the body was ready before the game was. None of this means Alcaraz can't do it. He's one of the most gifted players of this generation, and gifted players have a way of compressing timelines that seem impossible on paper. But possible and likely are different words. And right now, the honest read on this situation sits somewhere between cautious optimism and real concern. And it's not just about Alcaraz's own readiness in isolation. It's about readiness relative to the field he has to beat. The current era of men's tennis is defined by a small handful of players who have spent this entire season accumulating exactly what Alcaraz has been missing: competitive matches, tour-level pressure reps, and the kind of week-to-week sharpening that simply cannot be replicated in practice sessions, no matter how intense. That gap doesn't close overnight. It closes match by match, and Alcaraz is starting from a significant deficit compared to rivals who never stop playing. This is the part that rarely gets said out loud in the celebratory headlines. It's not enough for Alcaraz to get back to his own best level. He has to do it faster than the rest of the tour is currently improving. That's a much harder task than a medical clearance implies. If this feels like a new or unusual situation, it isn't. Tennis history is full of exactly this scenario: a talented player, a long injury layoff, a medical clearance, and a return that either becomes legendary or becomes a cautionary tale. The pattern tends to split two ways. On one side, you have the players who use the layoff as a reset. They come back lighter, hungrier, playing with a freedom that almost looks like relief, as if the pressure of expectation had been quietly lifted during the time away. When this version shows up, it can look spectacular, almost effortless, and commentators love to call it the best version of a player they've ever seen. On the other side, you have the far more common outcome: a player who is technically healthy but rhythmically lost. Movement half a step slow, decision-making a fraction late, results in the third round instead of the final. Not because the talent disappeared, but because 4 months of match rhythm doesn't rebuild itself in 2 or 3 tournaments, no matter how much natural ability a player has. The uncomfortable statistic that doesn't get talked about enough: the second scenario happens far more often than the first. Long layoffs are rhythm killers before they're anything else, and rhythm, not raw talent, is usually what separates a first-round exit from a deep tournament run. This is exactly why the timing of Alcaraz's return matters so much. Cincinnati isn't just a tune-up. It's the only real data point anyone will have before New York. If he looks sharp there, dictating rallies, moving with confidence, committing fully to his backhand under pressure, that's the reset and thrive version showing up early. If he looks tentative, error-prone, physically cautious even in low-pressure moments, that's the warning sign that the layoff cost more than anyone wants to admit. Either way, one truth remains constant: a green light from a medical team has never once been a guarantee of tournament readiness. It never has been for any player in the history of this sport. It's simply permission to try. There's one more layer worth adding here, and it's about how comebacks are covered versus how they actually unfold. The narrative machine around top-tier sport loves a clean story. Injured, healed, triumphant. It photographs well, it headlines well, and it's easy to sell to casual fans scrolling for good news. But the athletes themselves and the people who've worked closely with them almost never describe it that way privately. They describe it as a process, uneven, non-linear, full of small setbacks that don't make headlines. A great practice session followed by a stiff morning. A strong first-round win followed by a match where the same shot that used to be automatic suddenly needs a half-second of extra thought. None of that is a crisis. It's simply what real recovery looks like away from the highlight reel. The danger is when fans, media, and even players themselves start believing the clean version of the story instead of the real one. Because that's exactly when expectations get set too high, too fast, and a perfectly normal bump in the road starts getting treated like a disaster. So instead of just waiting to find out, here are the 3 specific things worth watching for once Alcaraz actually steps on court in Cincinnati, because these are the tells that experienced eyes will be looking for immediately. First, how he handles his backhand under pressure. Not in a routine rally, but on break points, on big second serves, in moments where hesitation costs the point. Does he commit fully, or does he shorten the swing, play it safe, bail into a slice when a normal version of him would go for the shoulder-high winner? That single shot selection tells you almost everything about whether the confidence has actually returned. Second, his movement on the recovery step after a wide ball. This is the least talked about but most telling physical sign. Players protecting an old injury often show it not in the shot itself, but in the split second after. A slightly delayed push-off, a guarded first step, a subtle flinch that television commentary rarely catches, but coaches always do. Third, how he responds after losing a tight set. A player who's truly back mentally digs in and raises his level. A player who's still carrying doubt from the layoff often has a visible dip. Body language drops, unforced errors climb, and the match starts slipping instead of tightening. Watch those 3 things in Cincinnati, and you'll have a far more accurate read on his US Open chances than any medical statement could ever give you. So here's where this leaves us. Carlos Alcaraz has done everything right by the book. He was patient. He chose the conservative path over a risky rush back. He got the medical all clear that every fan wanted to hear. On paper, that's a genuine reason for optimism. But paper doesn't win tennis matches. Rhythm does. Confidence does. Split-second decisions under the brightest lights in the sport do. And those are the things that don't show up on a medical scan. They only show up when the ball is actually in play against the best players in the world with a Grand Slam title on the line. The next few weeks are going to tell us far more about Carlos Alcaraz's US Open defense than any press release ever could. Cincinnati isn't just a warm-up, it's the truth serum, and that's really the heart of this whole story. It's not a story about doubting a great champion. It's a story about the gap between what a medical report can tell us and what a tennis match actually demands. A scan can confirm that tissue has healed. It cannot confirm that split-second trust is back. It cannot confirm that 4 months of rhythm has been rebuilt. Only real, competitive, high-pressure tennis can answer that question. And that's exactly why the smartest voices in the sport are choosing to watch closely instead of celebrating early. Whichever way this goes, it's going to be one of the most closely watched storylines heading into New York this year. If you found this breakdown useful, hit subscribe, because we're going to be tracking every single one of those 3 signals the moment Alcaraz steps back on court. And drop a comment below. Do you think he defends the title in New York, or is this comeback coming a few matches too soon? Let's talk about it down there. See you in the next one.